During this session, you will learn about ways to promote positive behaviors at all ages. And you will be led tonight by two of our experts, Jennifer Dull and Satish Murthy. Before we get started with the night, I would like to open our translation lines. So can we begin with our Mandarin interpreter?
Yes, I'm sorry. There should be another interpreter for the third meeting, or should I cover her right now?
Yes. Are you are okay to interpret this session, promoting positive behaviors?
Yeah, but I'm sorry, I don't have the phone line information.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Let me do this. Let me put that right into let's get this right here. And I'm going to actually put the lines right into right up so people can see them directly.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
好的，欢迎大家。如果你想使用这个普通话的这个翻译服务的话，请拨打电话347-966-4114，输入这个 ID 675-741-265加井字键。再重复一遍，如果你想使用中文的这个翻译服务，请拨打347-966-4114。这个电话的这个 ID 是675-741-265加井字键。如果你想听这个翻译服务的话，请确保你的手机是静音的。谢谢 ，Thank you。
Thank you so much. And let's switch over to our Spanish interpreter. Paola?
Kim, why don't I go find her if you want to go to ASL?
That's great. And for our ASL interpreters? Thank you. Okay. And we will return to our we'll return to our Spanish in just a moment. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and get started with Jennifer and Satish. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our session. We are so excited that you're here to join us and that we're here with you. We're all partners in this together, and it's really exciting to present on promoting positive behaviors at all ages. Again, as Kim graciously introduced us, my name is Satish Murthy. I'm a behavior specialist through the Regional Partnership Center in the Special Education Office, joined with my colleague, Jennifer Dull. She's the Director of Intensive Intervention, also at our Special Education Office of the division.
And I do apologize, folks, just for connectivity issues. When we're presenting, I will turn my video off, but I will turn it back on at the end. Thanks, Satish.
So here's our agenda for today's session, this evening's session. First, we're going to learn about basic behavioral concepts that are rooted in behavioral science and psychology. Next, we're going to brainstorm positive behaviors for your child that can be achieved at home and in your community. And finally, we're going to walk through a simple 5-step process to design a plan to teach and reinforce positive behaviors. This is a straightforward process, and you can apply this for your children or child at home. So here are our community norms. We encourage everyone to be open, be an engaged and active participant. As you can see in that last bullet, please do use the Q&A section to ask your questions. Take care of your personal needs. That's very important. We have wonderful sessions going on, and I'm so happy that they're being recorded. And finally, I want to reiterate, we are here for you. and we sincerely encourage and appreciate your participation. So we're doing a quick icebreaker, but it's just a reflection that we're going to ask you to do. And I think all of us have learned behaviors that often they become habits, and some are good and some we want to work on and change. So just reflect on a new positive habit you may have recently developed, are developing, or want to develop that you're excited and proud of. And the second question we always ask when we're thinking about behavior and behavior change and promoting positive behaviors is thinking about, how do we know it's working? How am I measuring my progress? And that could be not just for our children, but ourselves, our family members, and anyone in our community. We always want to think about, and this is an important piece of what Jennifer and I are going to be talking about, is always thinking about how we want to celebrate our success. If you guys don't mind, I'm going to give you just a quick example of something that I've been working on, just sort of as an example. Over the past year, I set a really important goal for me of cooking fresh, healthy food at home instead of ordering out or buying prepackaged meals. Now that might sound simple. It's a great goal, but as we all know, this is not as straightforward as it sounds. What I need to do to support this goal or this new behavior were included many different steps. One, I had to budget time over the weekend to go to the market and get the right ingredients. Then I had to budget time for prep and cooking time in the evening after work. And finally, now I don't have a dishwasher at home, so that also means I had to set aside time for cleaning the dishes afterwards. Now that's a lot of extra work than just ordering out or buying a prepackaged meal, but was it worth it? That's the question we always want to ask ourselves. Well, I definitely feel healthier, and I've had fun learning new recipes for vegetables and soups and salads. And in regard to number two, how do I know it's working and how do I measure my progress? Well, along with feeling more healthy, I'm excited when I look at my bank account and see all the money I've saved over the past year by just cooking at home. Now that's a great measure of progress. Jen, did you have an example you wanted to share?
Yeah, I could quickly just share. So one of mine, one of my goals is to get up early and exercise, right? So my motivation was, I really need to. I needed a little bit more reinforcement or motivation. So I would say, hey, you want to go for a walk when I would walk my dog? I hope I didn't say that too loudly because she hears those words and comes running. So she kind of helped me get motivated to do this in the morning. And how, for number two, how did I know it was working? I noticed that I started getting up earlier, started getting more steps, having longer walks, but it was really because she helped me because she was so excited in that. So sometimes we need a little extra help and we call on our friends and family to do that. Oops, sorry.
Thank you, Jen. And it looks like we are connected with our Spanish interpreter. So if I may just pause for a moment to allow Paola to share the language information. Hi, Paola.
Hello. This is a message in Spanish para los asistentes que necesiten ayuda. Este es el número que tienen que marcar. Es el 347-966-4114. Y con el número de conferencia es el 100-550-735 más numeral, en una línea separada en español. Si quieren escuchar el audio en español, pero prefieren permanecer en esta sesión de Zoom, por favor, una vez más, marquen el número que le hemos dado para poder ver la audiencia en su computadora, silencien su computadora y el volumen y marquen la línea de conferencia en español en su teléfono. Una vez más, el número a marcar es 347-966-4114 más el número de conferencia 101-550-735 más numeral. Muchísimas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Paula. So, positive behavior support, let's talk about it. Positive behavior support uses tools and techniques to help children and youth do better in school and at home. And we're going to review some of these tools and techniques this evening. Positive behavior support is based on a large body of knowledge and research about the best and healthiest ways to promote positive behavior. And lastly, positive behavior support is an approach that's tailored for each school, each student, and each family. So what does positive behavior support look like in schools? The goal of positive behavior support is to improve student behavior and academic achievement, right? They go hand in hand, and it's so important. The approach of positive behavior support is to change adult behavior in order to change student behavior. That's important. So I want to say it again. All right. The approach of positive behavior support is to change adult behavior in order to change student behavior. And this is something that's going to be true for you at home too. We do this by using data-driven assessment and decision-making, and most importantly, teamwork. Please remember, you're going to hear me say this all night. You are an important part of your child's school's team. So let's pause for a moment and reflect about where and why your children are successful. Right? So in other words, we're going to challenge you to think about what helps them to be successful. And these could be strategies, supports, or conditions. So for example, is your child more successful when they hear encouragement from a loved one or someone they're close to? Are they more successful when they're prepared for change? We need to know what are going to set our students up or your children up for success.
Thank you, Jen. The most important thing about positive behavior support, as Jen has been talking, it reminds us that it's based on prevention and instructional intervention. In schools and at home, we can put important systems in place. And here are some of them. I just want to go through them and describe a little bit further about what we mean by these terms. Proactive versus reactive. This means that we try and figure out any possible challenges and put supports in place right away before your child's asked to do a task, for example. Positive, not punitive. This is so important. Research shows that kids respond more when we use positive language and use encouragement. Effective, not just preferred. What do we mean by that? This is why we collect data. In my example, and I'll get to that in a second, what strategies are working, right? For me, I'd rather order out for pizza, which is preferred, but that's not going to save me money or make me more healthy. Cooking at home, making more salads is going to be a more effective way of reaching my goal to eat more healthy and save money. What do we mean by efficient and not complicated? Sometimes your child may want a choice that is not an option, so we need to consider what else can be effective. For example, if you ask your child to complete a household chore and they want a reward of a new iPad, even though that is preferred, it may not be something we can offer or may not want to encourage because it might encourage more time playing video games or using social media, which we may want to reduce. So we need to consider what are more realistic alternatives. Again, the big idea here, we want to focus on prevention and instructional or teaching opportunities. Some more about positive behavior support, and really just about the guiding principles around human behavior. And again, this is not just for young people, this is for all of us across the lifespan. We know that human behavior is sociable, understandable, and predictable. Behavior is changeable. Again, all of us have changed our habits over the course of our lives. And though this can sometimes be difficult, it can be done. Remember, we have to be positive and look for supports around us from our siblings, our peers, our family members, school staff, anyone in our community. 3, behavior occurs within an environmental context, not in a vacuum. So what do we mean by that? We want to identify people, places, or situations that might trigger or prompt specific behaviors. We also want to find out why they are triggering. And finally, we want to identify patterns that help us predict when certain behaviors are more likely to occur. This can help us prevent them from happening in the future. Finally, that last bullet point, behavior is learned and can be taught. That gives us hope that we can teach and learn across, and that includes our children, but also us. We're all in this together. Again, what all this means is that we know and we believe that behavior can change. We need to come from a lens of understanding that we need to teach behavior and reinforce the behaviors we are trying to promote. Again, the big idea here, is that changing the environment can change behavior. As adults, we need to be able to put in prevention strategies or change or adapt the environment when possible. For example, if you know that your child is more successful with routines and structure, you can add new routines and schedules to your child's environment for areas where they are struggling.
Right. In your meetings with school staff, especially if your child has a behavior plan, you may hear the phrase function of behavior, and we want to speak about this now. What does the function of behavior really mean? It means that behavior has a purpose. Through behavior, your child is communicating a message. We say that behavior is motivated by two things: to obtain or get something, or to avoid something. Obtaining something could be a preferred item, adult or peer attention, a sensory preference or stimulation, or a preferred activity. We also know that sometimes we want to avoid things. This can include avoiding a non-preferred task or activity, sensory stimulation or trigger, or avoid adult or peer attention. Something important to note is that this is not a fixed checklist. Sometimes the function of behavior is clear and we really have a good understanding and we can figure out what that function is, but sometimes it's more complicated. And that's why we need to make observations, collect data over time, and work with the team to process all of this information together. So I'm going to ask you to reflect again on what are some common things you notice that your kids either want to obtain. Some things that we've noticed is maybe it's food, video games, music, TV time, attention from someone that they prefer or love, right? Other times we notice some common things could be some avoidances in maybe homework or reading or writing. Maybe some of your children want to avoid chores. We all have different things that motivate us, and that's okay. We just need to have an understanding of what they are. Just like we also need to have an understanding of what the avoidance is. When discussing behavior, we want to go through some best practices. The best practice in school is that school staff connect with families to learn about your home and community environment. This includes practice that takes into account culture, race, ethnicity, family values, what are your daily routines, etc. When we speak about behavior, and when we speak about behavioral strategies, supports, or interventions, we must also consider your child's development or age. Have you heard this term before, educational benefit? This is a technical term that you may have heard at your child's school or during some meetings or other presentations. We recommend that families participate in IEP meetings and participate in your overall child's education, as it will support us with understanding your child's unique needs in learning. You are the experts of your children. It also means that we need to start from your child's strengths in order to overcome any areas of challenges. And it also means that we use those strengths to help provide your child with access to an education along with their peers. This includes setting high expectations and using specially designed instruction they'll need. And that means what supports they need in order to be successful. Lastly, when discussing behavior, we cannot forget your child's physical and emotional well-being. And we need to use a growth mindset. This is the belief that young people can learn and grow.
So now before we move forward into, again, I introduced that we're going to share with you and walk you through a 5-step process to promote positive behaviors at home. Before we go into there, we do want to just touch upon some considerations around, these are, again, developmental considerations at different grade levels. And we want to make sure that when we do take these, look at a developmental lens, we also want to make sure we take into consideration home and community culture and values, as well as adaptations that are appropriate and reasonable to promote and maintain high expectations for our children. So let's start with preschool. As you can see, an important milestone is exploration with adult guidance. And I think we all know that, where young people are looking to us right? For cues. So important we're there to promote that and respond and interact, right? As we move into elementary school, we want to support accomplishments in the physical, social, and academic domains. Here we are talking about the learning, practice, and mastery of important skills related to movement and physical exercise, making friends and sharing, and engaging in school academic tasks. As young people move into middle school, social relationships and peers become increasingly important. This is the time when children start to look to their peers for attention in social situations, whether it's in person or virtual. And when young people start to become more independent, building off the physical, social, or academic accomplishments they achieved in elementary school. Finally, during high school and late adolescence, independence, recognition, and an increasing sense of self are important factors for young people's development. Now, again, it's very, very important. We want to stress this. These milestones are not written in stone, but can be an important consideration and can be a good starting place as we develop social, emotional, and behavioral goals for our children. Remember, every child is different, and that's their strength. Start where your children are at and build reasonable goals while keeping your expectations high. Always be flexible, understanding, and above all, forgiving. We all make many mistakes before we master a new skill, behavior, or habit. We're all in this together, and we're here to help support children's growth and health. Later in this session, we're going to provide examples and ask you to reflect on what you might want to work on to support your child's behavioral success at home.
So we went through the background of positive behavior. Let's transition to actually talking about the positive behavior support process. This is our golden rule of teaching behavior. First, we define the expected behavior. This means that we need to be clear, objective, and specific. We do this because we will need to be able to measure that behavior. For example, if you tell your child to be nice, what does being nice mean? There are so many ways to be nice, so we need to be specific as to what being nice means. That means we need to define it again, clear, objective, and specific terms. After we define the behavior, we need to teach the expected behavior. Then we need to reinforce or strengthen the expected behavior.
Here's an example of moving from broad norms or expectations, you'll see those on the left side, to defining observable, measurable behaviors or habits. As Jen talked about, teaching is going to be very specific to what is observable and measurable. So when we look on the left side, we see 3 broad expectations for John. We want him to learn how to be safe, respectful, and responsible. Now that's great, but it is not specific and maybe too vague for him to know exactly what we're wanting him to do and how to exhibit these goals. So let's start with that first norm and make it more specific. John will be safe. Now, what does this look like, say, after school? John will look in both directions at the crosswalk and/or will wait for the walk sign before crossing the street. This is much more specific. This tells him what he can do. We can practice with him, and he can develop a new habit of doing things that are what we want him to do to be safe after school. What about respectful? What might that look like? John will wait his turn to play on the computer. Excellent. And we can teach that, right? And reinforce that and support that. Finally, what about John will be responsible? What does that look like? John will finish his homework and clean his room before playing with his brother. Excellent. So here we're starting to think about what he needs to do to be responsible. And his reward is going to be able to be playing with his brother. But we're being very specific, being very observable. We can measure how many times it's happening, and we can promote this positive behavior. Again, the big idea here is we always want to ask ourselves, can we see or hear these examples? Can we count how many times or how long these examples occur? And in this way, as I used my example before about celebrating and tracking progress, this is a great way. If we can count and measure how long these positive behaviors are happening, we can measure progress and celebrate them.
So we're going to walk you through this whole process together, right? We say it's a 5-step process. Step 1 is defining positive expectations. Step 2 is choosing a behavior you would like to strengthen or increase. Step 3 is to create a matrix. So that means what do you expect in different places or different routines? We will go into that and give you an example. Step 4, how will you communicate or teach expectations? And step 5, how will you reward and celebrate success?
Thank you, Jen. So in step 1, we're going to define expectations or values for our child. So we ask the question, what would you like to see our child or your child do more often or better? Here's an example I want to share regarding my nephew. We'll use this example throughout as we practice this 5-step process. So after school, my nephew, a 7th grader, will be safe and respectful when he gets off of the bus and comes home. He will be responsible and do his homework. This is a great start. And as we talked about before, the first question then I want to ask is whether it's clear enough for my 7th grade nephew to understand what it means to be safe, respectful, and responsible after school. Or is this too vague? So let's move to step 2 and let's make this more explicit and clear. Great. Now here in step 2, we're going to make a clearer and more specific definition. Let me read it for you. After school, my nephew will follow the directions of the crossing guard when he gets off the bus. When he comes home, he will have a healthy snack and complete his homework before going out to play basketball with his friends. The question we ask here, again, in each of these steps, we're always asking questions. It's an inquiry process. We want to ask to get deeper knowledge of what we really want to do, being very explicit and direct. So is this observable, and is this an observable and measurable definition? Remember, when a definition is observable and measurable, as we talked before, we can track progress of my nephew's goals. And then always we can celebrate his success as the new behaviors become positive habits. Jen described step 3 and introduced the idea of a matrix. This is a teaching matrix. We use this in schools, classrooms, and you can use it at home. So we're going to go through what this is actually doing. On the left side, you'll see common things we value, important things like safety, respect, responsibility. Next, what we're going to do, as we did in the previous examples, we wanted to define what these look like in observable terms. In this case, after-school routines. So, in terms of safety for my nephew, after school, I want him to look both ways and walk across the street from the bus stop. Okay, that tells me and indicates that he's learning how to become more safe, and I can see that. Respect, I want him to listen to the directions of the bus matron and crossing guard. And finally, for responsibility, what does that look like after school? I want him to eat a healthy snack and do his homework. Okay, these are all specific, as we talked about, observable, and we can measure them. Important also is we can teach them. Now, let's brainstorm, and I'm just going to take you through one box, but what you would want to do is fill out all these boxes eventually and create a full matrix. But for my nephew, let's just quickly, for the sake of time, we're going to look at responsibility. You can see it's highlighted in the yellow. And I want you to reflect for a second. What might responsibility look like for a 7th grader in the morning? And so for me and my family, what we decide is we want him to brush his teeth, right? Hygiene, get dressed, make his bed, and get ready for school. Now, this is not exhaustive. You want to tailor it to the specific needs and the areas that perhaps your young person at home, you want to work with them on, where they may be struggling. And so you want to make sure that you have specific examples that are specific to each individual child. And as I said, we're going to want to fill out the rest of this matrix to be able to fully capture everything we want our children to do during different routines related to the important values we have of, for this example, safety, respect, and responsibility.
So step 4 is how to teach expectations. And we have to find the right time and the right place in order to teach. It's when your child is able to focus and they're calm. We use a positive frame. We focus on the future. We're clear. And we have practice sessions. So expectations and behavioral skills are taught where we want to see them. We need context, generalizability, and practice. So this means that we need to teach the skill in the environment or in the situation that your child needs to use that skill. We suggest starting in one specific area or in one context first. Once your child masters that skill and can do it without you either prompting or reminding them, then you can move to generalizing. And this means trying it in a different context. So trying the skill with a different person or in a different place. And of course, practice, practice, practice. We all need practice, right? If you notice in this first picture, students are lined up outside. They're practicing how to safely line up for a fire drill. Their teacher took them outside to practice, since this is the environment that we're expecting this behavior to take place. In this picture, students are sitting on the steps of a building, of the school building. Here they're being taught safe ways to enter and exit the building. Notice that the educator has a visual aid. She's holding a sign that says, "Be safe." Some of your children may need visual supports like this. Also notice that the kids are raising their hands. This means that their teacher gave an instruction on how to be safe and is checking to make sure that they understand. We recommend you asking your children and checking for understanding to make sure that they're understanding what you're asking them. And in this last picture, students are seated in the cafeteria. This is often an unstructured time. And for some of our students, it may be a little bit more difficult for them. So they need explicit instruction on how we expect them to behave in the cafeteria, right? What behaviors do we expect in the cafeteria? So we teach them those expectations in that environment, just like the teacher did in that first picture. Please always remember to communicate with school staff on what behaviors you are working on at home and have those supports connected to school. Also, make sure to find out what behaviors are being taught in school. As much as we can, we want to use consistent language and strategies. So I mentioned visual aids when we teach a new skill. Sometimes we need visual aids to support us. I need things written down. That's my visual aid. This is an example of a first then board. When we're creating the first then boards, we need to make it as explicit as possible, meaning we tell kids what they need to do first and what they will need to do next. In this example, we're asking this child to do homework and then they can play basketball. When we're creating a first and then board, it should be based on your child's needs. So if they need a picture cue, you can put a picture like we have here, or you can take a picture of your child engaging in those activities and use that. There are also apps for first and then boards, and we're in the technology world, right? So there's almost always apps for everything. For some kids who may be able to handle an extra step or responsibility, you can consider using something like this. This is a first, next, then board. Let's consider our example with Satish's nephew. If we used a first, next, then board, it could look like something like this. After school, Satish's nephew will first follow directions with the crossing guard, next, eat a healthy snack and complete homework, and then go outside to play basketball. So which strategy is right for your child? Please make sure to keep open the lines of communication with school staff. If they use the strategies, they could help you use them at home, and they could teach you how to use them at home.
Great. And now we're going to move in, right, into step 5 of our 5-step process around rewarding and celebrating. And I can't say enough about how important this is. And I think we've mentioned it throughout. We really want to make sure that step 5 is done just as we're doing step 4. Step 4, we're going to teach, we're going to support and prompt, and we want to make sure that we're providing feedback right after that positive behavior. Behavioral science teaches us if we do that, we are going to see that behavior more often. Kids will realize and they're getting feedback on, hey, this is the thing that I want to be doing to promote a better habits, be more healthy, be more safe, be more responsible. Okay, rewards should be regular, repeatable, doable, and small, right? We want to be able to have them handy. They don't need to be expensive. Verbal praise or gestures can also be rewards. Again, simple things that will just indicate and let your child know that they're on the right track, right? And then again, if they've been doing it and there's been success in some of these new behaviors like being safe after school or being responsible in the morning are really becoming habits, well then formal celebrations can be there for much bigger accomplishments. Think about finishing schoolwork and thinking about times for graduation or moving forward in successes in any aspect, whether it's academic, social, or emotional. Again, the research shows us that to support a new behavior, it takes 4, well, I might even say more than that, positive statements, as opposed to only one corrective or direct redirection or corrective statement. Again, the key piece here, the more we look for and recognize and celebrate the positive behaviors we want to see, the more likely they will occur in the future and into independence and adulthood. So now that we've walked through an example together, we would just like you to, we'd just ask you to consider how you might be able to use this 5-step process to design and implement a teaching matrix for your child. We won't have time to do this together during this session, but we ask you to reflect and think about how you might try this on your own at home. Start simple, one behavior across different, think of a matrix and just safety, respect, responsibility, and think of 1 or 2 behaviors in each of those areas during different routines that you really want to work on, that you've seen your child maybe struggling with. And just a quick note, and I think Jen mentioned this, and it's so important, that the home to school communication, it's important that if your school has a teaching matrix or has norms that they're promoting or common values or what we call behavioral expectations, we recommend that you ask what terms they use, as consistency between school and home is important so that young people know what is expected of them across different daily routines. Now, I would add, the reverse is also important. Share with the schools what your family is doing and what you care about at home and what you're working on, because that can help support what might be successful at school. So this is, like I said, this is something you can create at home. It's a simple, you can use this on a computer, you can draw a chart. Have your child work with you, maybe put it on construction paper and design it together. It's just a simple matrix that is, it can support promoting behaviors that you want to see. Again, like I said, it's really important. Please make sure to include your child as you develop this, as well as the whole family in the process. The big idea here is once it's completed, you want to make sure, again, visual aids Jen talked about, make sure it's posted and make it easy, that it's easily accessible and able to be seen for the whole family so that everyone knows what we're doing. You can post it on the refrigerator, in the children's bedroom, the bathroom, in the living room, or the kitchen as appropriate. Key reminders are that it is accessible, as close to eye level as possible, that everyone in the household contributes to the creation, implementation, monitoring, and celebration of the plan. Again, can't say this enough, consistency is so key. Whether siblings, uncle or auntie, grandma or grandpa, or family friends are at home, you'll have the best success for your child when everyone knows what we are doing as a family and sends the same supportive message from all in the home community. Okay, we're about to wrap up. We're getting close. Again, that connection, how families and schools can stay connected. Please do seek support from your child's current teachers, supportive staff, paraprofessionals, related service providers as appropriate. Definitely share with your school staff what the daily routine and structure is at home, including what is going well and what may be interfering with remote learning, for example. Ask questions about your child's learning habits, preferred routines, likes and dislikes, as well as which supports worked well at school. Finally, ask your child's team how to implement similar supports and interventions at home.
Just remember, your voice matters. You're an important part of your team, as I mentioned before. There's many ways to communicate with your school team, and we encourage you to find ways that work best for all of you. The more that we can communicate and keep our practices, strategies, and supports consistent, and even our language consistent, the more effective they will be for your child, right? So if your teachers are using, or your child's teachers are using the first then, use that same language and use that same strategies at home. Satish and I want to thank you for joining us for the positive behavior supports at the Special Education Family Forum. One thing we just want to highlight also is that, remember, when we're talking about behaviors, we're promoting positive behaviors, which means we need to teach what we expect, and then we have to reinforce. I'm going to look through the Q&A to see.
And I want to add, just before we finish, Jen, we want to reinforce, but think of other words for that. It's not hard. Make it fun. This should be fun. It could be fun activities. We're all celebrating. We're all growing together. It's just a really wonderful opportunity to think about how we can all grow together. If I want to eat more healthy, well, my nephew, let's all eat more healthy. Let's all work together. I'll teach you new recipes, teach you how to cook. It can be fun. These are the kinds of things we want to think about. Make it simple. The science behind this is very simple. The implementation and sometimes the monitoring of it is more of a challenge, but we just want to be focused, deliberate, and intentional, and definitely celebrate.
Jennifer and Satish, thank you so much for this information. And as you mentioned around keeping it simple, while we have a few minutes left, I was wondering if you can just go back again to what you talked about, those basic functions of behavior motivations. I think, again, just reminding of the simplicity of the behavior motivations is a great way to leave us tonight.
Sure. Satish, do you want to address that, or I can? I'm more than happy to jump in.
No, I don't mind. No, I can do it. I mean, I'll just build off. Yeah, when we talk about it, I think that sometimes there are very technical terms out there. We'll hear positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement. All we're talking about is we want to set up the environment so that kids and ourselves can be more successful. Success is that's right there. And so all of us, again, I use that term preferred, right? How do I make it, what I want and what I desire? How do I get that? What's the payoff? And that's really all it is motivation, right? And the motivation to do better. Now it has to be desired. So this is where engagement, so any kind of teaching plan, whether you're in the classroom or at home, and particularly around social emotional or behavioral, is the more we can engage kids in it, the more they're likely to want to do it, right? And they'll want to do it because they're getting something. And it doesn't have to be fancy things. It doesn't have to be iPads. It could just simply be praise, a smile, right? A hug, anything, a call with grandma, on Zoom, and anything they can work towards, right? And when we talk about avoidance, right? Think about this. We're about to finish. And how many of you need a break? Well, we're just in the middle of this, right? Is it okay to take a break? Well, sure, right? And what's a break? It means that we need time to take care of ourselves, as we talked about before, as our norms. And that's simply it. We want to ask kids and find out, hey, if you can work for 20 minutes, yeah, let's take a break. And then, right, you can use first thens, right? But kids will be telling us, right, if they're avoiding a task, is it because they're not engaged and don't want to do it? Well, then how do I motivate them? Let's make this, again, fun. If they're avoiding it because they're struggling with the work, then let's teach, right? Let's teach that new skill, break it down, and then let's definitely celebrate it.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, Satish, because when we're talking about function of the behavior, it can be very complex, and there's many different supports and strategies that we could put in place, and it's really going to depend on that function. As Satish mentioned, what are you trying to obtain, right? So is it attention? Is it something tangible? Is it a sensory? Or is it a preferred activity? Or versus avoiding? And so we really have to work together as a team and observe, because it's not always easy to figure out the function of the behavior. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it's a little bit more complicated. You know, Satish mentioned collecting data, doing observations, and that's what we need to figure out is what is the function? What are we trying? What is your child trying to obtain? Or what are they trying to avoid? And we really have to, you know, Satish, you mentioned environment. We really need to take the environment into context too, especially when it comes to sensory preferences or sensory avoidances, right? Sensory processing affects all of us. We both have preferences or avoidances. And when we're talking about behavior, there is that link. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for being here.
Can I jump in I just had one last thing, Jen? I want us to make sure, and then I think it's really important also, and Kim, thank you for having us touch on this, because it's so important. It's the root of behavioral science. Functions of behavior, motivation, right? Wanting or trying to obtain or avoiding, these are neutral terms. There's no value judgment here. All of us need to avoid at times or escape. All of us want to obtain things. All of you are here to obtain something, I think, a community, information, knowledge, and that's important, and that's motivation, right? And just noticing that everything around us is reinforcing. So just see what's reinforcing for your child and try to build that into these plans. Very simply, ask them, include them, ask the school, find out what is preferred, what is that idea of reinforcing. What is something that motivates them, and build that right in and have fun again.
I'm glad you said that, Satish, because I've noticed a question in the chat with a child struggling with the distinction between doing work at school and home, right? So like Satish said, what is the motivation? What's going to help? So first we want to teach that desired behavior. If we want your child to do, you know, schoolwork at home, try a matrix, try those expectations, but then, or you could do the first then and use it for that way. First, you know, do this assignment, then you can, and then engage in a preferred activity. And as Satish said, reward, but find out what is going to motivate, you know, your child into what kind of reinforcements, right? What kind of reinforcements are going to help support them doing that work at home? Because if that's the desired behavior that you want, then put a plan in, teach that behavior, write those clear expectations, use that visual aid, and then put in the reinforcement. So Satish, I'm glad you said that. It was a nice segue into that question. But there's a lot, right? So, you know, Satish mentioned also before, what is the avoidance? Like, why aren't they doing? And okay, thank you. We have a minute left. So I would work with the school and your school team also to figure out why. Why are they not doing the work at home? If they're having trouble distinguishing between the two, what strategies can we do to teach them how school and home are connected, right? So there's many other, I know this is like a roundabout answer and it's not specific enough, but I think once we go to the function of like why they're not making that clear, like why they're not, you know, making that home to school or school to home connection, then I think we can put in an appropriate intervention. So it's always about that function, that why are they engaging in this behavior? And then always teaching and reinforcing. I know we said that a lot.
Thank you so much, Jennifer and Satish, and thank you so much to our parents as audience members. We hope that this session was valuable for you and for your comments and your questions in the chat. Thank you so much for that feedback. We look forward to seeing you. There are a few more sessions tonight, so please feel free to register for a 6 o'clock session, and we'll see you again. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.